AI might change the work, but human leadership determines if people face that change with fear or with purpose. If you're a leader trying to navigate the shift towards AI without losing the trust of your team, this conversation is for you. You'll learn how to build a healthy kind of resilience that helps you and your people grow through uncertainty rather than just surviving it. Welcome back to the Champion Mindset Collective podcast. I'm your host, Anthony Dahya. We're here to talk about the real stories behind growth and change today, and we're looking at how to stay human in the era of massive technological disruption. We're exploring what it is that looks like to lead through change when the stakes feel high and the future feels uncertain. Victoria Pelletier is a global workforce transformation leader, board director, and best-selling author who has spent her career leading people through massive organizational change. After becoming a chief operating officer at the age of 24, she moved into senior executive roles across some of the world's largest organizations. Her professional success is matched by a powerful personal history of overcoming significant childhood trauma and adversity. Today, she is one of the most compelling voices on human leadership and healthy resilience, specifically helping businesses navigate the human impact of AI and workforce transformation. Her TED Talk on resilience has reached millions, and she continues to advocate for leadership that prioritizes trust, empathy, genuine connection. Victoria, welcome to the Champion Mindset Collective.
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
It's a pleasure. Before we go into a whole lot of questions, I'd really love to go back to your childhood, that journey from childhood to now. Tell us how you got here.
I feel old these days as I just celebrated a milestone birthday, but I'll try to keep it short. My childhood is a big part, Anthony, I think of who I am and why I'm as driven as I am. So, I mean, my story, I'm born to a drug addicted teenage mother who was very abusive to me in and out of the child welfare system the first few years of my life. The most loving thing she could have ever done, however, is agreed to give me up for adoption. So I was adopted out of that environment to a loving like parents, but lower socioeconomic status. So no food insecurity per se, but no money for things like school field trips, etc. I think it's those things in particular, both experiencing trauma and some challenge and adversity, that has really shaped who I am. My mom, and my mom is the woman that raised me, said to me, I think I was 10 or 11 years old. She said, Tori, which was my childhood nickname, she said, you need to do better than us. And she didn't have to utter those words because I was determined to be better than biology or circumstance. And so that's caused me to be very driven. Maybe I think there's a little bit of DNA, like fight or flight. I'm a fighter. I'm competitive. But there's also just this desire to truly be better than where I came from. And so that's why I think I'm so driven. And then, as you stated in my bio, became an executive at a very young age. I bought my first company at 20, my first house at 19. It's just kind of now innate in who I am to be that driven.
Yeah. Wow. What a journey you've had. What age were you when you got adopted?
4.
4. Okay. Yeah. And you wouldn't have any recollection of that, would you?
Sadly, I do. I think, most kids, if I were to ask my own children to talk about anything probably before the age of 8, I'm not sure they would remember it. But I think because it was fairly traumatic for me.
Yeah.
And use, I was pushed upstairs, downstairs. I had a cigarette in my eye. That one was an accident, but I wore a patch for many months as a result, right? Just that kind of thing. Sadly, I have memories of those years.
Yeah. And to be starting a company at 20 and being a CEO at 24, it's not something that you hear of every day.
No, it's unusual for sure, as people want to talk to me and for coaching or mentorship and want to understand how to follow that path. I'm like, let's be clear. I was a bit of an anomaly. Yes, I started working at age 11. My first leadership role was at 14. So even though, and yes, I bought a company at 20, but at 24, when I became an executive for a larger organization, not my own, I'd already had a number of years of leadership experience, but that's very uncommon. I do recognize.
Yeah. How does a 14-year-old go into leadership? And then how do you buy a company at 20?
So it's interesting. Most of my career has been spent in large enterprise corporations. However, I do have this entrepreneurial spirit. So the company I bought when I was 20 was a casting agency. My mom put me in acting when I was a young teenager because she actually thought it would break me out of my shell. So although you and your listeners seeing me as the extrovert that I am now, who does a ton of public speaking and media. I was not always that way. I was much more shy and introverted. So my mom put me in modeling, which led into acting. And the agency that represented me were a couple of guys that I'm originally from Canada, and they had moved from Vancouver, where there was a booming movie scene there, to come to Calgary, which is where I was growing up, and they wanted to move back. And rather than just shutter the doors on this business, I had been not only working with them as a representation for me, I'd been doing a little bit of work within the agency. And so I bought it, but I wasn't going to give up my day job. So I brought in a partner to help run it. And so this, like I said, this entrepreneurial spirit is there. I bought or built four companies, I think, and one of which I still have, which is like my speaking business and
Mm,
my authorship, et cetera. But and then even for the large companies that I work for, like I'm a builder. Grow, scale. There's a company that I just left a few weeks ago. I built a consulting practice within there from nothing to 100 million in 15 months. Like that's just
wow.
who I am.
It just sounds like it's something that you just do every day. For most of us entrepreneurs, it's a bit of a journey, right? Yeah. So you've lived through some heavy personal adversities, and today you're helping huge organizations lead through uncertainty of AI. Looking at those two different worlds, what have you learned about the difference about change that actually breaks people and the change that helps them grow?
I think that there's a lot of things that we need to think about when we think about how to manage change. If you're going to talk specifically about AI, first of all, I think we're not even measuring adoption in the correct ways. I will coach businesses on the need, you need to build trust. And so with that comes strategic, transparent communications. So if we're going to do that, like being open, with the workforce, that it's coming. It is going to change most roles. What exactly does that look like? We don't know. I think trust gets built by leaders saying, I don't know what I don't know. We're
Mm,
gonna find out together. I'm gonna communicate it. And maybe in some cases, then you commit to timelines. Like, so for everyone who's fearful that they're gonna lose their job, I'm so saddened by large companies who are doing large scale layoffs right now and blaming it all on AI. I will tell you,
mm,
just left a technology company that builds AI. Most companies are not AI native yet. They're not using it at such scale to be able to lay off 10 or 15% of their workforces.
yeah,
So when we think about, how do we manage change effectively? Let's start with building trust in the leadership, in the strategy and the path, and the what does it mean for me personally? Like, are you going to invest in me as an employee to keep me relevant, building my skill for the future as things are going to change? And if not, that's also okay. But you need to tell me that with enough time to like go and search and find another role. So that
yeah,
there's a lot that we need to do, I think, to see, change and adoption be successful. But it starts, I do think, with trust of the leadership and of the organization around like what the strategic path is, particularly around AI.
yeah. Even if you could take AI off the table, what you talked about, trust, that's foundational, right? You can run a business if you don't have the trust of your people and you're not, your strategy and your people aren't aligned together. So regardless of AI, that's foundational. And with AI, definitely we've got to build that trust and then be able to communicate to people like how does this impact your role? What are the potential changes? Or how is your role going to evolve over time? And maybe we don't have the answers, but at least starting the communication is better, right? Because when you communicate, you build trust.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
I think there's also a very strategic like path that needs to go into it. Like I'm finding there's lots of leaders who are just coming up with a great use case without understanding the full impact, or they'll communicate the change only to the people that most immediately impacted by the use of that AI use case, rather than understanding like our employees talk. So like I spoke to a
Mm,
CEO who ran a very large team, 1,500 colleagues in his finance team, and he was starting with a use case that only impacted 50. And I was like,
mm,
great. What's the communication plan? And he's like, well, we're just going to tell them that these 50 people. I'm like, no, no, no. We need to build a path that's going to communicate to everyone within your team. And by the way, probably other parts of the organization, even though it's only impacting 50 today, it's going to be much broader. There's a lot more work involved, I think, than just getting some forward deployed engineers and great UX designers to come in and help build the AI to make
yeah.
sure it's fully successful.
Yeah. A lot of leaders think that it's only this amount of people with this section of people, but it's like having been through so many the restructures and redundancies, I know firsthand that it's not the people that leave that are just impacted, it's people that are left behind as well. And when a certain chunk of people go, it's like people going, well, who's going to do that? And so people want clarity, people want to know what's going on. So I agree with you. It's really important to communicate and build that trust. What was going through your mind in those early days when you were trying to find your feet?
There's lots of lessons I've learned, particularly as a leader. And so in those early days, I don't know if the phrase imposter syndrome existed, 25 or 26 years ago when I first stepped into the executive role, but I could say I think that's what I was feeling. It was actually a very large stretch role for me, although I had a number of years of experience, in leadership and in the industry and the work that I was doing. I actually went from leading operations to all of a sudden leading everything except for finance, so sales, marketing, technology, those kinds of things. So I did look around and wondered if people were going to question why I was there. So I was not confident. I was insecure. I should say, I mean, not only was I the youngest executive, I was also the only woman. And so I felt like I needed to show up with, I'll say, like a bit of a mask on, right? Like I was going to be all business all the time. I certainly didn't tell my backstory because I didn't want people to feel bad for me. I didn't want people to think I was vulnerable. Certainly didn't want to show emotion because I thought that meant weakness. And so sadly, in my mid to late 20s, I learned I had a nickname as the Iron Maiden. And at first I was like, well, that's unfortunate. But I thought it's because I've always been very comfortable making tough business decisions. I've led or been a part of more than 100 corporate restructures in my career thus far. And so I thought it was that. But actually, some further conversation later, I realized it wasn't. It's because I was all business all the time. I'd walk into, a meeting, jump straight to the agenda. I wasn't taking time to build trust, with people to get to know them. And so that was a hard lesson I had to learn, and I needed to start to get comfortable doing and saying things that made me uncomfortable. I'm actually super emotional. My nickname is by a good friend of mine is the turtle. I'm very resilient, but inside I'm like soft and marshmallowy like.
Mm,
I cry at like the Humane Society commercials when I see these poor animals in their cages, but I never let anyone see that because I thought I was weak.
mm,
So starting to show some emotion, starting to tell my story made me really uncomfortable, but I saw the power in doing that. And to the point now that it's like, now it's very innate in who I am. Like I'm
yeah.
like open and transparent and I do it all the time. I talk to strangers in elevators, like all these things that I wouldn't have done back then.
Yeah, and it would have been freeing for you as well because you're letting go of all that. How did it keep you from letting the pressure get to you in the early days?
Not only did I wear a mask, I feel like I came with a suit of armor. Like
Armor.
I, I was never gonna let like anyone sort of like anything get to me. And so I just plowed through this. The TED talk that I gave was on what I referred to as healthy resilience because I was resilient, but I don't think in the most healthy of ways. I
Mm,
plowed through it. I didn't take the time to process the challenge or adversity that was coming my way. That said, I'm very fortunate to have always had one or two people in my life that are my people, my person. And so whether that was my ex-partner or my husband now or some very close friends, like sometimes just speaking through like my day is
mm,
sometimes I'm not even asking for advice. It's just like, let me,
process.
say it out loud, process it, and then move forward. Like that's been incredibly helpful for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's so important. And look, if I look back at my journey and all the adversities that I've been through, never really had people to be able to offload, talk to, and be able to process it, like you said. And it's only in the last probably maybe 10, 15 years that I've done that, and worked through it. And some of it's been just sitting in my own space, and the discomfort, as you talked about earlier, is sitting through that discomfort and actually, as I call it, the shadow work, and working through all the suppressed feelings and emotions and so on. And it's important. It's important to do that. Now, you were saying just before that you talk about the healthy resilience versus just being in survival mode. For those who have used work or achievement as a bit of a shield for a long time, how do we know when our strength has actually become a survival strategy that's holding us back?
We talked about the word like to process. I think a big part of it is there needs to be this level of like reflection and self-awareness to
Mm,
understand. And that like so we can't prevent all of the challenge or adversity that comes our way. However, the approach I've taken is when something happens is to go like, how could I have changed the outcome? Could I have influenced this? Did I contribute to it being in this place? I go back to I hated it at the time, but she would force me to sit down. I was such a tough kid. And I think because of those early years, I tended to push people away before they got too close or before I thought they could hurt me. And she could see that. And she'd sit and she'd make me talk for hours. And she's like, Tori, I want you to understand, like, why? Again, I hated it as a kid and into my teen years when she did that. But it is that I think it has been incredibly helpful. And for me, I'll say that's one of the most critical steps in healthy resilience. And to your like question, like understanding what is holding us back. Is it fear? Is it an insecurity? Is it self doubt? Is it some other like baggage that's come along because of past trauma or experience? Like, let's understand that. Then we can build the strategy with intention to move beyond that challenge or adversity and hopefully achieve the goal or objective that you've set for yourself.
Yeah, I agree with you. Absolutely. When did you realize that pushing harder wasn't the same as getting better?
I had some real epiphanies. One was, like I said, in my late 20s when I learned as a leader the unfortunate nickname that I had, but also actually in and around that time, my ex partner was diagnosed with cancer when I was 7 weeks pregnant with our second. And after, going through like years of chemo and just understanding. Yeah, I've got a good friend of mine, Shwedel. He says all the time, your health is your wealth. And, so seeing my partner having gone through that, understanding what's really important. And, my definition of success, and I intentionally use air quotes for that. I mean, it was defined by, again, being better than biology or circumstance or where I came from. And a lot of that was based on material possessions. And also, was I moving higher up the corporate ladder? But none of that is what brought me personal joy, happiness
Mm,
or to my family. And so I shifted in my late 20s into my early 30s, stopping doing things that didn't bring me personal or professional joy or value. Now, you can't not do your laundry, but you can hire someone to do it. Right? So I know I delegate, I outsource both at work and at home. So I got really good in being like really maniacal around how I spent my time. And as a mother as well and balancing a corporate career that has me traveling all the time, like there's trade-offs. I hate people who ask me about work-life balance. It's not. It's just a life. We integrate it and we figure in. I've made choices that were great for career, choices that were great for family, and sometimes they oppose to one another. But I think on the whole, I've done it relatively well. And so I'm still like, I push hard, like people like I get up and I work out at the gym every day. I sit on boards. Like there's lots. My schedule is full, but I'm happy. And
mm,
like clarity and intention, I fill my day.
exactly. Yeah. I don't believe in work life balance either. I think it's more of a harmony between life and everything that you have. I mean, work is part of life, right? So it is just life, but it's how you harmonize all those different components of life in your day. And in some days, some things are going to have more time than others. But it's also important to make sure that we are prioritizing ourselves and not so much being external focused, but also being internal focused as well. How does a high performer start to let those walls down without feeling exposed?
Well, I think I say all the time being comfortable with discomfort. Like you say, without being exposed, I think you need to get comfortable that you're going to be exposed at some point, caring a lot less about what other people think about you. And I think when you can sit comfortably there, that's what makes it a heck of a lot easier. But also for me, it's like I'm very clear on, again, what success looks like. And for me, it's in business. I mean, it's a multitude of factors and not all the traditional ones that we're measured on in terms of revenue growth and profitability. Like for me, a big part of definition of success for me as a human being, not just as a leader, is to build up other people. So to be a good leader. So I make sure that I've got a commitment to how I develop others. I'm really committed to building healthy and positive cultures and being an example for that and walking away from environments that aren't like that.
Yeah.
But I do that now. Not everyone's comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And but I'm very like principled, strong degree of ethics and value and again clarity around what's important to me beyond just the business numbers on the board.
Yeah. Love it. I agree with you. Now, when you just going back to the age of 24 when you became a COO. That's a massive jump. In those early executive roles, what did you have to learn the hard way about what people actually need from a leader when things get difficult? You talked about trust. Is there anything else that you believe?
Yeah. I do think there's a level of resilience for sure that you need to have. I mean, change is the only constant now. And to a greater extent that I've ever seen in my nearly 40 years of working now.
Mm,
And so I think you need to be resilient. I think you need to be a strong communicator. It's interesting that, in the era of AI, like I think one of the most important skills is storytelling.
yeah,
Right? Like, I get AI can write and write some really great things, but, like, people are still gonna continue to do business with people, and they buy, from people who can help tell great stories. So I think communication's, like, critically important. I wrote a book called The Power of Whole Human Leadership, and in that, it's the trust, it's transparency, it's authenticity. Authenticity is a word that's often abused, but being, comfortable and creating an environment for people who can show up as their whole selves. I think that's really, really important. I saw a huge shift during or post COVID with all the social media headlines that were grabbed around the great resignation, quiet quitting, those kinds of things. I just think that people at that point said, I'm done. The command and control top down, which is what I entered the workforce into, and there still exists very, very prevalently today, is not what people want anymore. They want to
yeah,
work for people who they can trust. There's no loyalty in business, we know that, but we're often loyal to people, and so I want people to invest, particularly leaders, to invest in much more of those human skills and being empathetic versus, again, just, like, looking at people as a number.
yeah, exactly. I agree with you there. Wanted to ask you what your definition of resilience is, because resilience means different things to different people based on the journey that they've been on. Could you tell us a little bit about what resilience actually means to you? Resilience and then also healthy resilience.
Yeah. Yeah. Resilience, is about being able to weather the proverbial storm, right? Like that stuff's going to come your way. You don't crumble under the weight of it. You're able to move forward. Healthy resilience, however, is where you do that, but in a fashion where it isn't just wearing a suit of armor all the time, that at some point might break down. For me, I have sort of this, I talk about like 5 steps, I think, to develop healthy resilience, which I think there's a level of it that can be in your DNA. As I said, fight or flight, fighter here. But I think it's like a muscle that you can build. And so, first of all, for me, healthy resilience is clarity around goals and objectives. And you'll have many, everything from like financial, career, relationship, health. You're just clarity on that. I'm not a person who needs a vision board on the wall, but for those who do, cool. You do you figure out what makes sense, but like be really clear on that. And then it's that the level of self-awareness and self-reflection, I think that one must have around what's preventing me from achieving the goal or objective. When, a challenge comes to us, how did I handle it? Like, so sitting with that. And sometimes you need, and so that one of the steps is like, I think, is having people around you who can support you with that. In some cases, it's people who are going to help you when you've got blinders on, like who are going to tell you these are the blind spots you are not seeing. This is how people are experiencing you, right? And perception is other people's reality. But it's also those who will like love you, support you, encourage you. And in some cases, it might actually be professional help. And there's also, I use the phrase often for many things, but strategic intentionality. So modeling the thoughts, the actions, the language, the behavior that gets you closer to the goal. And a really important one, and this one was hard for me, giving yourself permission to fail. Um,
Mm,
as the A type personality that I am and have almost always been, like, I hated to fail. But at some point, I think if you're going to be resilient and be able to move on with like positivity, you need to let that go. Treat it as like a learning. So hopefully it doesn't happen again. And like pick yourself up and like just remember like one foot in front of the other is progress. And so, that for me, those are the kind of the steps that I personally take into developing a healthier level of resilience versus, like I said, the early one as a child, I push people away. I think I'm going to get hurt. I would push them away. Now I embrace. I
yeah,
remember a partner who cheated on me and I went back to dating not too long afterwards. And my friend was like, "Aren't you afraid?" I'm like, "Afraid?" I'm like, "I'd rather love and experience with a risk of getting hurt again than
yeah.
not." than not.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, because you can't just put yourself into a little cocoon and try and protect yourself. And I think that's what ends up happening is that you feel hurt, so you just create this protective layer around you, and then you don't show your true self to other people. I can relate to that because I remember I felt that hurt from relationship breakups, and it was really my doing because they coming from a place of cause or effect. And I remember going to a 2-year acting class. We learned this technique called the Meisner technique. And every time we had to do this exercise, my teacher would say, "You're being deflective." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He says, "You're deflecting." And I'm like, "I don't think I am." And he goes, "Yes, you are." And that actually taught me a lot about what I was doing is I wasn't opening myself up. I was actually just deflecting back. So yeah, it's interesting journeys that you go through. Now, what was the biggest thing that you had to unlearn about leading people at that early age?
I had to unlearn, as I said, my approach to leadership and that sort of all business all the time, like being vulnerable. That was a big unlearning for me. The other was, I think, having sort of grown like through the ranks quickly, albeit, but like I was like, I don't think I was ever a micromanager, but like I set a bar so high that I think it was very difficult for people to achieve. So I needed to also get comfortable with letting people operate at a more reasonable pace and getting to the goal line in a way that worked for them versus me, and also learning to let go a little bit more, and some of that was just trust in my own team, right?
Mm,
And I think actually stepping into that role, I'd been managing large call centers and banks, so and like operations, and I went to an outsourced call center company that had large banking clients, so that's part of the reason they wanted me. But all of a sudden, like I said, I went into like I was leading sales and marketing and client management and IT and HR. That helped me quickly unlearn a few things and learn a little bit more around trust and how do I bring together the right kind of teams, because I didn't have the requisite functional experience for some of these areas that I was now leading.
mm,
And so it also for me was so evident around like how do we bringing together team. That's why I'm also very, very big around like diversity of all,
mm.
but like this great diversity of experience, because the wonder and power when that comes together. So that first role was actually hugely powerful for me and setting me up for the rest of my career on learning and unlearning some things.
Yeah. Tell us more about the diversity side of things.
Yeah, I grew up in Canada, which is a wonderfully multicultural and very accepting country overall. So I'm fortunate for that. My mother as well was so much so and so loving of all. So I grew up with love and acceptance of all around me. So I'll state that's helpful. But I came out as openly bisexual queer at 14. My first marriage was to a woman, and I'm now married to a man, but I'm still very openly like queer and I have a trans son. And so being a member of the LGBTQ community, being often the only senior woman, and even over the last number of years, I've worked in technology companies, where I walked into a room and it was me, one other woman, and 40 guys. So feeling like I was the youngest queer, only woman when I stepped into that first executive role. And so I was like, how do I like looking around the room, like, how do I make other people not feel like they're the only one? But also that same role, like I tell you, it was a bold move for me to do. I was a brand new mother at that point when I took that executive role. And as I've already stated, very big stretch role for me. Outsourced contact center. So, and back in the day when there was like telemarketing, so it was telemarketing, it was customer service, it was some early days tech support. That in North America is not a destination job generally, right? Working in those kinds of environments. That is, you're a new immigrant to the country, you're underemployed or unemployed. And so you take these 300% turnover. I remember walking into our staff cafeteria and someone was heating up their food in the microwave and apologized for the smell. I think they were of East Indian descent.
Mm,
And I was like, "Look, don't. Like, we should all again be proud." And I realized in that environment, so again, I had 300% turnover, very costly to continue to have to, there were 6,000 employees
wow.
in that company. And so I'm like, how do I create an environment where I can keep people here longer? Again, I get it. They're new immigrants or they're looking for their next, whatever real, quote unquote, real job is they're in between. But
Mm,
for the time that they're here, how do I keep them more engaged, which increases productivity? And ideally, how can I keep them longer? Even if they wanted to stay on a part time basis later, I needed to create a place where everyone felt a sense of belonging.
mm,
So there was a union trying to get into like there were three Canadian offices. They were in actually in some of the others. And I worked hard to build it, make it be a great place to work. And so I learned the power. I knew the power personally. I'd been taught it, but then that's when I saw it in action at work. And so I hate when, for many companies, and I now live in the US and it's so polarized and like saying diversity, equity, inclusion, it's bad and they're repealing all these things, but it's not a tick in the box. It truly is amazing for business as much as it is for humans. So for me,
yeah.
I'm committed. I still write publicly. I post. We're in June. It is Pride Month around the world. And so I'm going to proudly, stand there, yes, as a member of the community, but also speaking loudly around what companies and leaders need to do more to support all aspects of diversity. But for this month, Pride Month.
Yeah, absolutely. At what age did you start identifying yourself as, in that diverse,
Yeah, as at 14. So at 14, and
14?
I went to a Catholic high school, so, there weren't lots talking about it openly, and so at that point, I said I was bisexual, although growing up in Western Canada in a smaller town, there wasn't a lot for me to explore, so I still dated mostly guys, but then when I got to Toronto, the big city in Canada, and actually the bank I worked for put me up at a hotel until I found an apartment right in the heart of the gay village, and so like, wow, this is amazing. So then probably for a couple of years, I did say, hey, I know I'm a lesbian because I was only dating women. And then I met my ex-wife and went on to have two children together with her. But I'm just openly, I choose to say queer now, although my younger son says, Mom, you should say you're pansexual. And I was like, that word didn't exist when I was young. So I'm like, so I won't say bisexual or queer. It just means I'm not straight. That's what so I've always been quite open about it. Like, again, I'm very fortunate. My mom was I don't think I told my mom until I was 20, and I just remember her saying to me, she's like, "Well, Tori, just remember, women can be jerks too." I'm like, "Thanks, mom." So it was great.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, they can be. Yeah. And look, straight is boring. So it's like you got to put some color in it. Hence the pride and the rainbow color, right? So there we go. Yeah. Now you talk about human leadership as well, which sounds great great in theory. But for corporate world, vulnerability can still feel risky. Why are trust and humanity becoming non-negotiable business strengths right now?
Well, as I said a bit earlier, I think, the workforce is demanding it. Like they want to work for companies and leaders that are aligned to their purpose, their values. And although right now there's lots of layoffs, but a year ago, where you could walk across the street. I mean, I say that somewhat flippantly, but to get a new job, so companies are looking to retain, talented people, keep the institutional knowledge. They need to be showing up and doing things very, very differently. And so, I think there is an expectation with the newer generations in the workforce versus my parents' generation, even entering the workforce, that they want to work for like empathetic, human, like authentic leaders. And again, there might be choice and time and space where you do things because it's the right opportunity, you gain the right kind of skills or experience, or you need a paycheck, and that's fine. But I spent a lot of time at the intersection of large scale business transformation, whether that and by business it can mean technology enabled as well. I've been a part of more than 40 merger and acquisition transactions, 100 plus corporate restructures. And that intersecting point to see value achieved through the transformation always comes down to the leadership and the
Mm,
culture and getting always that is the differentiator. And like I said, I have enough experience that when I tell a leader that, having done it as many times as I have, I can say that this is, where success is going to lie or failure will happen.
yeah. And what is generally their response? I mean, are they open to it, or are some of them are like, no?
I think they all agree.
Yeah.
But then putting it into practice. And by that, like there's some of them who I think are afraid to hold up a mirror, right? They get their employee engagement surveys and they're like, why is it so bad? And like I'm the type, I have a couple nicknames. And one of them is the CEO whisperer. And that's because I speak truth to power and I build trust with them, but I can then tell them, like, we're going to hold up a mirror to you or your direct reports. Like, you collectively are the reason why the engagement results are what they are. Like, the culture is what's that lowest sort of common denominator, like that you're willing to accept the toxic top performer. Like, are you okay with that? So they all agree, but it's hard work, and it means making bold moves in coaching people to be better leaders, to not talk down to others, whatever it is that they're doing. And then if that's not successful, that means coaching them out of the organization. And that's where I see. So I think everyone agrees, but they're not willing in many cases to put in the hard work and take bold and decisive action to actually deliver the kind of leadership and results to achieve the culture they put on the nice fancy vision mission value statement on the walls.
Yeah, in my experience, because I've spent about 30 years in corporate, and in my experience, the engagement surveys, people were told to be open and honest, but then when it came down to it, they were like, like I remember being told, if you don't score over this, then you're actually being a detractor, and so on. And it's like, well, hang on. On one hand, you're asking us to be completely honest about this, and then you're putting the pressure on us and saying, just to make yourself look good, you're asking us to score yourself high. And so it just didn't sit right with me. How can you openly be able to communicate that? And then I guess we don't, as an employee, you don't really see the other side of it. Like, how are they taking those results and what are they doing with them as well? And in my last conversation, actually, the latest episode I've just released, we talked about a lot of this in that. And this was a lady from the human resource side of things. Why do you think so many leaders are still afraid to show their human side?
A bunch of reasons, some of which I had insecurity, fear. Like, I was afraid to show emotion, be vulnerable, tell people my past. I wanted to be liked.
Mm,
And for many, I think that's it. I also think that they don't teach you in business school by the like this kind of stuff. They teach you how to read a P&L, right? How to put together a strategy document, but like they don't teach you how to be a good leader and all of the important aspects that good leaders bring to the table. So I think it's a combination of all of those.
yeah. How do we change that? How do we, in an organization, help leaders become more human than just what they've been learning in business school?
I think that needs to be part of there needs to be some leadership training. In particular, like, many companies, I'm not going to say it's a mistake, but they promote their top performers into leadership roles. And on one hand, it's great. You want the player coach, like who's so that like the coach who's played the game, so to speak, and who can teach others how to be successful. But again, as we just said, there are different skills and traits that are required. And so I would say, particularly at that first line leader role, like for companies, have a leadership development course. Talk to them about it. And it's not about, okay, here's how to use our HR systems to complete performance reviews and like the tactical side of things. Again, the real things, some recommended readings that people could do. Like we're not having enough conversation about it. And we're so focused on the functional education, but again, not the part about being a really successful leader. So I think let's just start there to help.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Now, in my experience, I've seen leaders go through training, some shape or form, and the first few weeks they're like pumped and they're like, "Yeah, I'm going to do this," and so on. But then they go back to their usual self. How can we make it so it's actually part of their journey? Where it's great to do the courses and the training, and that's great. But it's like you've got to put it into practice. And how do we make it so that it becomes part of their role, that to show more of human side, and show more empathy, and rather than invulnerability, because that's the thing. A lot of what I've noticed is that a lot of leaders won't show empathy and vulnerability.
Well, so I think we need to model it from the top all the way down so that new leaders see it. I think sadly for me, although I have worked with many good leaders, I have very few mentors, like, and ones that I kind of looked and I aspired to. I had like very good working relationships with many of them. Where I learned the most, Anthony, was from the horrible leaders who I learned I was going to be nothing like them. And so instead, I think let's start with yes, education, but like let's start with modeling it from the top all the way down through the organization. I think
Yeah.
that is incredibly powerful.
Yeah. You've sat in many boardrooms. What does this look like in a boardroom in reality?
Uh, It's a mix. So I've sat on not yet a public board. So for any of your listeners who need a large public board director, please call. But I've sat on many both not for profit and for profit private boards. Some that were like hands on, I was on a fintech startup for a number of years, and that was much more like a management board where we had to work with the CEO who didn't actually have all of the business expertise, but was a phenomenal idea guy. And so hands on, that was bringing all of my corporate experience directly to that board seat and table. And others have been much more around for governance. And so making sure that we were doing the appropriate things. I've chaired a number of committees from the technology committee to on the not for profit side, the sitting on the scholarship committee as we were giving scholarships to children in the child welfare system. So it's powerful to sit there. But sadly, I've also worked as a consultant and coaching boards, and far too many of them are under the thumb of the CEO, who's often the chairman. And like was working with one. Actually, it was interesting. It was a number of years ago. On, I think he was my take. I think he was looking to really leave his mark because I think he was in his last couple of years before retirement, and there's some bold moves he wanted to make. One of them was actually around diversity within his own workforce and wanted to move things forward. And I said, well, then we're going to start with your board.
Mm,
23 members. First of all, that's a massive board. And there were only 2 women and 1 person of color.
wow.
So, like, we're gonna again model from the top. We're gonna start there. When people like go and hit your website and they want to look at the leadership team, including the board, then that construct needs to. So, I mean, that's again at a diversity level. I worked for a company where the CEO, she only put people around her who agreed with her. Like again, you need people who are going to challenge. I
Yeah.
think to you think about like for reducing the risk,
Hmm.
having greater innovation and problem solving, like you need that. So I'm usually the disruptive one. It's a long answer to get to. I'm like the disruptive one at the board who's like going to call people out and go, let's dive, let's get a little bit deeper under the numbers here. What's going on? So
And what sort of response do you get from the board usually when you're in that disruptive mode?
it's usually been fairly favorable. The only time I've learned though at the end of a very long board meeting and people are just ready to get out, we might want to table it for the next meeting instead.
Uh,
My own lesson I've I've taken away.
yeah. Now let's go back to AI. So AI is moving fast, as we know, and we don't know what's coming. And I mean, I had a conversation yesterday with around super intelligence. It was all exciting, but it's also uh, we don't really know where it's going. A lot of leaders are focusing on the tech and the tools, and I get people saying to me, "What tool should I use?" And I'm like, "Wrong question, right?" And so, what are most organizations getting wrong when it comes to the actual people who have to use this stuff every day?
So much. So there a number of things. So first of all, I think well, there's a couple of approaches I think to AI. I mean, there a lot. Everyone, I feel like they're like we just have to do it because everyone's doing it. I'm like, let's stop for a second. What's our strategy around AI? Are we building it because our customers are demanding it? Because there's a really particular use case that's going to solve something for us, or are we using it for productivity gains to hopefully improve our margins? Maybe it's a bit of all those things, but like one, let's be really strategic around why we're doing it and then building a path towards it. The next is human centered design. So we've got like, again, forward deployed engineers who don't understand the process flow. They're not living and breathing in it. And even the user experience, like and design around it. So it's horrible. Like if you want people to use it, make it easy, make it, pretty, like all the things, and maybe not frictionless, but like let's also not automate and build an agent on a very poor process.
Yeah.
So that's where I see we get it wrong. And then going around adoption, I said earlier as we were talking, I think companies are measuring adoption incorrectly. So you think about Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, measuring whether people are using it every day,
Hmm.
usually using it to transcribe or summarize calls that they're on, doesn't truly mean that you're gaining all of the productivity gains that Microsoft states that you are. Are you don't need to become a prompt engineer, but like are you educating? So this goes to, are you enabling the workforce effectively to use it? And then do you start to measure how they use it and then adjusting and doing further enablement sessions? We talked about trust. Are you building trust? Like, I was so disappointed that was it Meta recently, who Meta or Microsoft, I actually forgive me, I can't remember right now, who said that they were forcibly putting on like keystroke monitor of all of their employees so that the AI could learn better, but essentially was to take their jobs and they couldn't opt out of it. Like, so the massive fear, like, let's not do that. Again, as we talked earlier, like, let's communicate, let's build some trust around why we're building it. If people are going to lose their jobs, let's state it, but commit to timelines and we're going to reskill or redeploy, or otherwise help you with career counseling to find your next best job. So there's a lot. And I think,
Yeah.
too many are just going, here's the great use case. We're going to go after it versus bringing your HR team as your strategic business advisor. So you've got the business that owns their P&L, the technology that's going to enable it, the security team that put guardrails around it, and HR all need to come together to build a holistic plan and strategy over how we're going to ensure that AI is successful.
Yeah, and with HR, it's also got to be people focused. It's also got to be where you're actually going and having conversations with people, not just dictating what happens from a human resource perspective, right? Because in a lot of companies, HR doesn't function the way it really should. And also, what you said before is are you using AI on a process that's not efficient? I know from my experience that processes are generally made up of workarounds and band-aids. And when you put AI over the top of that, it's going to amplify everything that's beneath it. So if you've got, as that saying says, garbage in, garbage out, right? But as my guest yesterday said to me, it's actually good in, good out. So that's another way of saying it, is that if you put good stuff in, you're going to get good stuff out. And then also understanding what are the pain points that you're looking at solving? And when you build that into your strategy, and again, a lot of people see AI as a separate strategy, but it shouldn't be. It really should be part of your organizational strategy, right? It's not separate. It's part of your ecosystem. It's part of your strategy. You've seen what I've done with my podcasting website, right?
Yeah.
And that's a strategy, is like, how do I make this function as a whole, not just something on the side? How does it support me as a business owner as well? Now, why is this more about how we act than the tech that we're using?
Well, I think to your point earlier, when people ask you like, what should you be using? That's not the right question. So what are we trying to achieve? I
Yeah.
always start with the outcome. Like, what is the outcome we're hoping to achieve? Again, so even in developing the plan, like, what's the North Star for us doing this connected to the business and human drivers? And so starting with that and then like working backwards to some extent, even down to like I have conversations. So a lot of companies are trying to do it to for productivity gains, and so actually I say, well, then there's a very different way. Like the problem statement here, we wanted. So I was actually recently working with a large car manufacturer who, because of in Europe, because of pressure from the Chinese car manufacturers coming in, they're going to have to take some of their workforce out. Like, great. So let's understand. But it's like, but they want to see how can we redeploy it to R&D somewhere else? Like that's going to be revenue, like growth driving. So there's a totally opposite way to do it. Flip it on its head. So if we're doing it for productivity gains, then let's start with the tasks that people perform and understand. And the problem is the role of organizational design has been unfunded or like underinvested in for years. And so that OD role within the HR environment, HR is one of the first places that gets cut. That's actually super critical right now because the role profiles typically only would get looked at maybe once every couple of years, and or it's just a big bucket, this job family. So let's start to look at tasks that get performed. What logically makes sense for us to automate and build AI agents for? And when that moves to the AI agents, what work remains? And starting to be really intentional around like adjacencies in the tasks that get performed and creating new roles, but doing that with experts who, so what I'm seeing, I've written some articles about like Franken jobs. They're coming in and they're going, like there's this one leader I was working with and they wanted to create this new like type of architect role. And it was a combination of like 6 to 8 different roles. And I'm like, but
Mm,
the skills are not even like closely related. They're on the opposite end from deep skills around process and workflow. And then the human skills like doing change management and writing communications, like those aren't closely related. So I wouldn't suggest that we put that together. And so that's where I think let's start to flip it. So we start with the outcome in mind. And then if it is going to be things like productivity gains, then there's a really great way to attack it, but you're doing it from a very different way than most people I think are thinking about.
yeah. Although when you work doing it in like an architectural type of role, you've got to be able to understand the process workflow side of things, as well as understand how do you bring about that change in that organization. Because architecturally, you might say this is how we're going to do something, but then you've got to get the people on board who are going to perform or do that thing. I remember 2, 3 years ago, I was in an organization in a local government transport agency, and I said to the team, one of the teams, I said, "You are the subject matter experts," and they were a geospatial team, and that is my background for 20 years. And I said, "You're asking the business what they need. They don't really know based on their limited thinking or
Mhm.
knowledge, and you are the experts in the geospatial world. Why aren't you going and providing your thought leadership? Why aren't you spending time doing research and development? And then, understanding their business needs, their pain points, and then doing some development to then come back with some answers of how this is how we could solve this problem." And they were like, "Oh, we're just too busy. We don't have time." And it's like, it's like, well, some of these things you can actually get maybe the junior staff to do, and then you have a group of people that focus purely on that. I see the role of AI with AI coming. I see the role of subject matter experts spending more time doing R&D and providing thought leadership than actually doing the tasks themselves. Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're right. And that's actually where we talk about like sort of the human centered design behind it. Like, I think there's a lot of people who are coming at it from very like senior level thought leadership, but like it requires people who are deep in the weeds, so to speak, who understand, who can help, who understand. I think of like, go back to my contact center days. What That's one of the first places that automation began, even if that was just through like the IVR and the phone system
Mhm.
to the early days of just having some chat agents. So what gets actually this goes back actually to like thinking about the human and side of it. What gets automated is the standard operating procedure but without understanding, well, hey, all these exceptions happen and they get kicked out and it has to go from a tier 1 support to tier 2. Yeah. But again, if you're sitting up here as like the executive of the organization and you're like, oh, hey, we're going to like build this agent and it's great, I see all these calls and da-da-da, and this is where, so you need to get down like to like
Yeah.
the deeper levels, and why I think you need to go through like some of the design workshops with people that again come with different perspective from those that are doing the work, but also in many cases if you're asking them to think about new and different, you need some that aren't going to get mired and this is the way we've always done it. Like, now's the time to reimagine. And then the last thing I would say also is, as I said, I come back to sort of the human side of things. The work that remains, that doesn't get automated, requires much more human skills. So again, I think contact center, the IVRs and the chat agents are taking away a lot of work, but what remains usually requires an extreme amount of exception handling, or you're dealing with irate customers. So you need to start to think about educating the workforce on the human skills. I talked
Mm.
about storytelling, empathy, like, if you're gonna be dealing with those, because all of the routine procedural stuff is handled by an AI agent. So
Yeah.
again, you need to, think really, really differently.
Yeah. 100%. Absolutely. How can leaders start the conversation without making everyone in the room feel panic about their jobs?
I think we need to acknowledge that this is the new revolution, much like there was when
Yeah.
machines first entered, when the internet first came. Like, we need to acknowledge it is going to change. Let's not pretend it is, but we don't need to be fearful. So I think we need to talk about it in a very different way and acknowledge, I don't know what I don't know right now. We're all figuring it out. But then it's also like, what's the commitment we're going to make to
Yeah.
our colleagues and to one another? Like, timelines. We're going to keep you informed. We don't know. We don't have the full strategy baked yet. When we do, we can tell you what that's going to look like, but we're going to need to work through this together. I think that's really, really important. And like I said, sadly, I just see companies who are like, they're like, oh, we're reducing 15% of our workforce and it's because of AI. No, let's be clear. No, that's not why. But now you're just creating fear in everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. They use, as you said earlier, they're using AI as an excuse to cut costs and so on. Yeah. And it's an interesting space that we're in. As you said before, change is constant. The only thing that we have certainty around is death and taxes.
That's right.
So we've got to get good at embracing uncertainty and actually without having that certainty without the logic side of things, and actually deep within us going, everything's going to be okay. It's like a human being doesn't know what's going to happen 5 minutes from now, but they have faith and they have the certainty within them that everything's going to be okay. And the more you put that kind of energy out into the universe, then the more you're going to draw that back, right? But if all we're putting out is fear and panic, then guess what's going to it's going to create more chaos in the business. Yeah, absolutely. Now, last set of questions. If someone is listening to this and feels that they are trying to survive the next restructure, having been through so many myself, it's quite disconcerting. Or the next wave of tech. What is the first step for them to move from a place of fear into more a place of confidence?
I tell people you're the CEO of your career,
Mhm.
of your brand. And so put yourself squarely in the driver's seat. And in doing that, I think there's a lot of work that you need to invest. Like don't trust in the organization and the leadership team to recognize your talent, your skills, or assume that your level of performance is going to save you. Again, there's no loyalty in business, sadly. So make sure as the employee, like you should constantly be, working on your brand. Your brand is more than just your job title and the company that you're working for, right? So like learn how to tell a more effective narrative about who you as the holistic, professional and human being. I told my older son when he was first coming out of college, like around building a brand, getting on LinkedIn, and first of all, he's like, "Mom, LinkedIn's for old people." I'm like, "Dude, old people like old people like me who are actually going to hire you. So like, let's start working on that. But also make sure you maintain your skills and relevancy. I actually I wrote a book a little bit more towards leaders and like their transitions, but accompanying it was because there's so much transition right now and people thinking about what's next. There's lots of people going into like fractional portfolio careers. I wrote like this free companion book to it called Before You Leap. And I kind of brought together and again, it's a little bit more intended probably for like at the leadership level, but I think there's applicability for all in the workforce to take the ikigai philosophy, the Japanese philosophy. When you look at your vocation, doing like, what does the world need? What are you good at? What can you get paid for? But then I sort of marry that again with some of the like the culture and leadership things that you'll be
Mm,
well. So I tell, your listeners, if you're readying yourself for that, like get prepared, understand, like, what do you want to do? And maybe it's not actually what you're doing today. Maybe you want to become an entrepreneur. And so you can have a side hustle until it grows enough for it to be your full-time income, build a plan around that, but maintain your relevance. And so build your skills. I mean, most companies have a very robust learning management system with access to tons of content and there's so much of it that's free now. So like learn, be voracious learners, keep yourself relevant, but also I'd say anchor on like the goal, the objective, and what will bring you joy and passion around the work that you're doing.
yeah, 100%. Yeah, absolutely. And you talk about the brand and you're talking about the personal brand, right? It's about creating your personal brand. And a lot of people like Daniel Presley are talking about it now where the company brand is relevant, but the personal brand is more relevant because the face of the company or the face of the brand is actually the human being. And so, yeah, I agree with you. And yeah, there's so much content out there you can learn from. There's books, there's podcasts. Listening to podcasts is a great way of being able to learn as well. How do you help someone find their value when the tasks that they used to do are being automated?
I always ask people, like, what do you enjoy doing?
Mm,
And I tend to think that for most people, like the stuff that gets automated is not necessarily their favorite tasks anyways. I'm a bit of a disturber, as you've already
yeah,
discussed. I do not like the status quo. I love challenge. So for me, I like the big hairy challenge. And so I want this stuff to get automated that is very routine. And I'd encourage people like feel less threatened by that, but lean in and spend some time. What do you enjoy doing? Far too many people like are unhappy. I sign a lot of my social media posts with like no excuses. You have choice in how you're going to react or respond to things and
yeah,
like where you're going to work and what you're going to be doing. And
yeah,
so spend time thinking about the work that you do. What are you most excited? What do you want to tackle at the beginning of the day? What are you putting off? And the stuff that you want to tackle and dive right into is the stuff that you love. Do more of it.
exactly. Yeah, do what excites you and take it as far as you can. And Yeah, the automated stuff is the repetitive, monotonous stuff because the best things to automate is the things that are repetitive and that people don't like doing. And that I feel like in this AI world, it's about automating the things that people don't like doing and giving them more opportunity to do the things that they love to do. You could be building your business, like you said, your business on the side as well. That's what you love. What does it mean to be unstoppable in a world where the rules are changing every month?
So being unstoppable is like my personal motto and philosophy. And as we said earlier, the only constant is change. Rules are changing, everything's changing. I refuse to let anything prevent me from achieving the goal or objective I've set for myself. And so learn the rules, sometimes break them if you need to, the appropriate ones. As I said, I'm very like values and ethics driven. So I'm talking about the appropriate rules to break. But that's a big part of being resilient. Plow through walls if there's something you want to achieve. That for me is what like being unstoppable is all about.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Outside of and what you do, how do you serve people and who do you serve and how do people connect with you and tell us about your books as well?
So I serve people every opportunity I get. When I think a big part of developing a strong personal brand is I say there's four parts to it. I'll just jump to the last one is around legacy. Like, what do you want to be known for? So for me, when I die, I don't want people talking about solely. They'll be sure they'll talk about business success I've had. I want them to talk about the fact that I made the workplaces, the community, and the world at large a better place when I left it than when I came into it. And in doing so, one, I raised two really good human beings and my own children, but that I was very committed to a diverse, equitable, more inclusive environment, every environment. I created and fostered that, and I was focused on building up people. So I'm in service all the time. I spend a ton of time, not only within the workplace, but outside of the workplace, coaching and mentoring people. I try to make sure that I am a very outspoken advocate for a lot of those things. So I'm constantly in service. I have chosen to sit on not for profit boards as well that are aligned with the things that I'm passionate about. Most recently, I was on helpusadopt.org. So, helping families who were looking to adopt children receive grants. It's very expensive in North America, in many cases, to adopt. Before that, I sat on the child welfare foundation in Canada that help provide money to these kids who are in the system. So there's lots of ways that I choose to give back. Ways to connect with me. The best way is I have a website which is victoria-pelletier.com. And so your listeners can learn about me as a speaker, executive coach, personal branding coach. All of my books are there as well. So I have five, the fifth of which will come out later this year. So one is called Unstoppable. That was a co-authored book that some publishers invited me. And as I said, that's my motto. So I'm like, yes. And so I contributed a chapter to that one. I wrote one on personal branding, more around what is a brand? How do you develop your brand? The follow-up to that is the one in the fall, which is how do you then activate? What's the strategies for building and taking that brand out into the world? I wrote one around leadership and culture called The Power of Whole Human Leadership. And one that just came out last week as we're recording this is the Leadership Transition Guide, which helps people sort of build it's like a modern take on the book, the first 90 days. So like, how do you build that like 90-day plan, but also as a leader, how do you do that with the people in mind? So from the leadership lens. So I've had great joy writing and narrating. I listen to a lot of my own content I consume audibly. I've enjoyed writing and narrating the books, and five over the course of the last 5 or 6 years is a lot. So I don't know when the next one after the second one this year will come out, but I love it.
Nice. Yeah. Wow. 5 books. That's a lot. I'm in the process of starting my first one.
Who knows where it'll take you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, actually, what I've done is built a book builder which draws on every single episode that I've done, and I can pull that content into the book, right? Because it's all in my ecosystem. So I can say, "Here's a guest talked about this. Pull this in." But that's the plan. But we'll see. We'll see how we go. The plan is that every episode, every guest will be featured in the book as well. So
Good.
so
Love it.
we'll put those links in the show notes, but also you'll get a dedicated page on the Champion Mindset Collective, and on that it will be your bio, your links, the article, the practical guide. So there's a guide that basically is a 3-page guide distilled down from the transcript of this episode, and it gives people practical reflection points and steps to apply what we've talked about in their lives or in their business as well. Okay, now we're at the very last part, which is the quickfire questions. So these are 6 very quick questions, and you can answer these in a single word or a short sentence. Now, the first one you've already answered earlier in the conversation, which was how do you define success, and has the definition evolved for you over time?
So, yes, I've already stated it. So, I will say again, my definition has changed drastically. And I'm glad it has. It's much more focused on bringing joy and value to what I do personally and professionally.
Who's been your greatest inspiration and why?
My mom, and sadly, she was very unhealthy. She was quite overweight and she smoked 2 packs of cigarettes a day. So she died when I was pregnant with my second. And I wish I could have told her that she was such an inspiration for me. And I thank her for helping me be resilient and becoming who I am today.
What is something that you believe that others may disagree with?
Lots of things. So I'm struggling, Anthony, to find one.
Just pick
I
the one that comes to your top of your mind.
I learned a long time ago that I don't need to be everything to everyone. I didn't need to try and please everyone.
It's a good one. Love that. If you could go back and give young Tori some advice, what would that be?
I would have told her so much earlier that it was okay to be vulnerable and to shed my shield of armor much sooner.
What is one message you'd like to share with the world?
I talked a couple of times about like getting uncomfortable. And so I'll leave them with one of my favorite quotes is by George Adair. And it says, everything you've ever wanted lives on the other side of fear.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to write that down. Was it George Adair? Yep. And the last question for you is, what does it mean to you to be a champion and have a champion mindset?
I think each person defines what championship means for them. I remember telling my children that, like, you define what success is for you. Don't do it based upon what I've achieved. And so I'd say define what championship looks like. And with that goal in mind, then be really intentional. And so that's the mindset part of it around what it's going to take to achieve that level of champion.
Awesome. Love it. Victoria, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate how you've defined the difference between surviving and actually healing. It's a good reminder that our strength doesn't always have to be a suit of armor. The one thing that stood out to me is that AI adoption is more about human behavior than just about software. If we want our teams to move forward, we have to give them the reason to trust the process, as Victoria has said many times in this podcast. Victoria, thank you so much for joining me and sharing your story. If you're watching this or listening to this episode and you've enjoyed this conversation, it's resonated with you, has given you some value, please subscribe and share this with someone who can benefit from it as well. You'll find all the links in the show notes, and also you'll find it on the episode page on the Champion Mindset Collective. And if you're looking for help with the human side of things, what Victoria shared, connect with Victoria. If you're looking for help with AI and actually understanding how you can use it in your business, or wanting to, I'm offering a 40% off at the moment for a clarity assessment where we go through your strategy and the outcome that you're looking for, and we'll step through that. So there's a link in the show notes. Please connect with me and we'll go from there. Thank you for being part of the Champion Mindset Collective. I'll see you on the next one. Lastly, I just want to say you are loved, you are worthy, champion your life, champion your greatness, and have an amazing day.